All right, hey, let's get started. I got a ton of demos to show you guys. Want to first thank you all for taking the time to come to this session. Really appreciate seeing all your smiling faces. My name is Justin Incarnato. I'm a program manager on the Orchestrator team. Been with the company about, I hit 15 years in February. 4 kids, 1 on the way, 1 wife. Huge college football fan. Lots of folks I recognize in the audience, so it's good to see a lot of you out there. Familiar faces. It always helps to kind of ease the tension when you're up here talking in front of a bunch of people, especially a room this big. I walked in, I was like, this isn't my room, but I guess it is. So that's good. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about Orchestrator and specifically what we have for SP1. We've got quite a few investments that we made in the SP1 release. We have quite a few investments in some new IPs that I want to cover with you guys. And then I've even got some workflows that I kind of rolled myself just to show you guys what you can do outside of just your standard integration packs. So we'll definitely cover all the new ones that we have, and these are things like Exchange, FTP. We'll look at vSphere, which is one of the older ones. We'll look at VMM, we'll look at SCOM, we'll look at HP. We've got a new FTP IP as well that we'll look at, and we've got a new Azure IP that we'll look at to do some Azure management. We've got a community IP that I found off the Codeplex, the Twitter one, so if you can tweet anything with the hashtag MMS 2013, we may see it up on the screen, but that's if we have time, but it was just kind of a fun one that I found also. So first off, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the back end and what composes Orchestrator and kind of where we're at from a release perspective. Then we're going to talk about some of the new IPs and some of the investments that we've made there. And then I've got 8 or 9 demos that I want to show you guys. Just kind of walk through the UI, show you what it takes to build a run book. What is a run book? What's an activity? How can I join these things together? How do I connect to different machines that I want to talk with? And it's really, at the end of the day, about the orchestration and the automation piece, but I really like to tout the integration piece. And so if you look at our cloud, their cloud, my on-prem, your on-prem, their on-prem, we're really kind of platform agnostic. We don't really care where those assets live. We can manage them using some of our activities. We can manage them using modules in the form of commandlets that different vendors release. And I'll kind of go into some of those demos as we get through. So how many of you are using Orchestrator today? Awesome. How many of you are thinking about using Orchestrator and that's why you're here? Good. How many of you don't know, don't care, never knew what's a management server? And don't be shy, because this will kind of determine how fast I blow through this kind of front end slides. Good. And if you want to spend more time after this session on the infrastructure and redundancy and high availability and like, hey, Justin, what does this mean and why do I care? I'll be at the booth, the Orchestrator Service Manager. I think it's the PowerShell booth at like 2:30, and I'll be there for a couple hours, so you guys are welcome to come by and we can talk more in depth about whatever you'd like to discuss that we don't cover here. And so there's really no way to win when you talk about, hey, it wasn't technical enough, it was too technical. I'm going to try to stay in the middle ground, try to take care of everybody's needs as far as kind of what they want to see. If you could hold your questions just to the end, just because if the internet's on and working, I want to get through all these demos just to show you guys before the thing dies. So we'll make sure we get through those. So with that, let's get started. Today, what is Orchestrator and where is it at today? So Orchestrators are a nice workflow engine. It was an Opalus code base that we had. Does the microphone sound funny? Is it echoing or is it just me? I don't know if the sound guys will have a look at that. If you look at where Orchestrator is today, this was the first time you'll see all the products in CDM, Virtual Machine Manager, SCOM, Orchestrator Service Manager, release on a cadence. And so we're all releasing at the same time. You guys may have seen today update rollup 2 for SP1 released. Orchestrator is now part of Microsoft Update, and so we had a couple fixes to a couple of foundation objects. So if you have an Orchestrator instance, you will get an advertisement today as of about 10 a.m. about new updates. And so point being, if you look at the cadence release, all the System Center components have snapped to a unified cadence. So it's not just about where we're at for SP1, but what we're working on for vNext, and also our update rollups. And so we want to make sure that we have an update rollup release that's on a nice scheduled quarterly cadence that you all as customers and your customers can snap to. And we're also thinking about a release update to snap to that same cadence for integration packs. And so if we need to take some fixes to the vSphere IP, if we need to take some fixes to FTP, Exchange, SCOM, VMM, we want to release those. They'll still release out of band. They'll kind of be on their own web page on TechNet, but at least you guys will know, hey, I know that URX has released. I know that a set of updates for the IPs is also released. So that's where we're at today. What are integration packs? I think Omar, a lot of you guys know Omar. One of the best analogies he used when we were talking back in the SCOM days was if you look at kind of an Xbox, right? That's the platform. And so if you look at Orchestrator, that's kind of the Xbox platform. And the integration packs are kind of like the games, right? And once you start adding the games, you can start to do more and more things. And so we have these games or integration packs for all the different products. All across the System Center suite, HP, BMC, we have them for vSphere, we have them for different products, different connection points, BMC. And so I'm also looking to you guys. I've got a Twitter handle, and I just got on Twitter a few months ago, so if I say something that sounds stupid, forgive me. If you guys want to say, hey, Justin, I'd love to see an IP for XYZ, you know, maybe we need one for SharePoint, maybe we need one for ServiceNow, maybe we need one for TFS. What are those integration packs that we're kind of missing today that you guys would like to see us start to think about or start to work on? So integration packs, again, they light up the scenarios for connecting into your workloads, you know, whether that be Exchange, vSphere, Amazon, whatever the product is, VMM, SCOM, that's what lights up those scenarios. Inside of each of the integration packs are activities. String the activities together and you get a nice formed run book. And that's some of the examples that we'll look at today. So I'll show you the run books and how we make them, and then we'll actually go into the demo. So we talked about where it's at today. So if you look at what we did for SP1, we had a lot of core bug fixes. And the bug fixes I'm talking about when you guys go to like an expand window and it's this big and you're trying to put some script in there. Well, now you can expand those things out. If you didn't install the SCOM console on a runbook designer, you used to get a box with a red X that said OK. Right? You're like, okay, you know, what am I supposed to do with this? So fixes like that. This is, we also snapped to our localization globalization plans, and we wanted to make Orchestrator kind of that first class global citizen. And so we've done a snap to the Windows Server release, and we have it available in all 19 languages, so the 18 plus English. So we have completely localized builds of Orchestrator as well in all the core 18 languages. Support for Windows Server and SQL Server 2012. We needed to make sure, just like all the other products in CDM, that they worked on the new version of Windows, the back end, and also the front end on the designer for like Windows 8. And we needed to make sure it worked on the latest version of SQL. And so we wanted to make sure that for the SP1 release, we supported both those platforms. Cool thing about Orchestrator SP1 is you can still put it on an older platform. You can still run it on Server 08R2 and SQL 08R2 if you want to, but just know that it supports the new platforms as well. OIT updates. How many of you are OIT authors? So the 3 of you in the room, you probably love cascading dependencies, and since there's only 3 of you in the room, come by the demo and I'll tell you why that's a lot cooler than waste the rest of your time on why that's cool. Integration pack, bug fixes and updates. A lot of investments in the SCOM IP, things like recursive actually working, things like looking at a polling interval to give parity with the same IP that we have for Service Manager, for example. VMM, when VMM goes and lights up new scenarios in SP1, we want to come along behind them and make sure that we support those scenarios. So big investments in the VMM IP, big investments in the SCCM IP as well. We'll demo the VMM and SCOM IPs, and we'll look at some of those other IPs that we have in the catalog as well. So the back end, what does the database look like? So it's a SQL Server back end, pretty standard stuff here, just like any other System Center component, we rely on SQL. Orchestrator is very light. It writes one database, the Orchestrator database. It's on, we can either live on SQL 08R2 or SQL Server 2012. Management server is a communication layer between the runbook designer and the Orchestrator database. The runbook server. So when you look at the management server is probably the worst named component if you look at an Orchestrator design, because even if the management server dies, you can still stop, start, and pause runbooks, right? The only thing you can't do is design them. You need to go through the management server to get into the database that way. The cool thing about the runbook servers is you can have X number of runbook servers. And the runbook servers are actually going to be responsible for spinning up the policies that actually go out and do that work. So you can have affinity with runbooks. You can say, hey, maybe Walter has a specific runbook that you say, hey, I want to always run this particular workflow on server A. You can affinitize those runbooks to servers, but be careful when you do that, because unlike using the default policy where policies will just spin up on any available runbook server should one become unavailable, you don't get that kind of fail back when you affinitize. So be careful when you do that. Lost my, there we go. Web service, so we're a RESTful web service, which allows us to, you can use third-party tools to call into the web service, pass the URL, pass the nice GUID, start a runbook, stop a runbook. It's all RESTful, so you can attach any workload to it and call it from a Win32 app. You can call it from a web service. You can call it from Service Manager, for example. The console lets you stop and start runbooks. And if you look at the orchestration console, this is really the place where you'll see a lot of your job statistics as well. You can look at how the runbook is composed. You can stop and start jobs. And when you invoke a job, you can pass it parameters in the web console as well. So you don't necessarily have to grant users access to the full-blown designer. You can give them access to the web console as well, just like a lot of the other System Center components that we have in the suite. Deployment Manager, this is at the end of the day, this is where you take your IPs, suck them into your system, register them, and deploy them out to your runbook servers. It's a component that gets used fairly less frequently than a designer, but just as important as anything else. Runbook Designer, this is where you get your nice editor. And I'll get into that, and we'll show you guys some of the demos of what we're looking at when we're actually designing our runbooks, looking at our workflows, deciding what we want to connect to, deciding what we want to automate, deciding how we want to connect into these systems and pass it our credentials, and I'll show you guys all that. We've got a tester as well. I think I'll try to do maybe one of the demos, and I'll fire up the tester just to show you guys kind of what that looks like. It allows us to set breakpoints. It allows us to look at the input, the output, and look at kind of that workflow in real time as it's running, and it's great for doing debugging of your workflows. And we'll look at that tester as well. And all these things are nicely in line with the designer. You can fire off the console, you can fire off the tester, and kind of look at those in real time. So, I think I've talked enough about integration packs. You guys, hopefully the games analogy that I gave you between what it is an integration pack works for most. And again, and for those of you who are like, hey, Justin, man, I came to your session to figure out what this orchestrator was. You're blowing through this back-end design stuff. You guys will have these slides again. I'll be at the booth, and we can talk more about how you want to do design, what a good architectural design looks like based on the number of workflows, based on the amount of time you want to automate away, based on the type of activities that you want to automate away, and we can talk about all those things later. So that's the integration packs. So here's some of the new and existing. So if you look at new, we've got 2 for Exchange. We've got one for Exchange User. I'll demo the Exchange User one. We've got one for Exchange Admin as well. This allows us to manage both on-prem mailboxes and cloud mailboxes as well. So my mailbox is in the cloud. A lot of the demos that I'm doing, I'm going to relay, and at the end of the workflow, I want to send a mail to myself to say, hey, your VMs are created. Hey, your FTP directory is created. So I think just about every demo that I have, I'm going to leverage this Exchange User activity. And again, we're using the Exchange SDK. We're still using the 1.2 version. We will implement the 2.0 and probably an update release for the IP. Super simple to configure, has a lot of activities that the common Exchange functionality for creating messages, looking at appointments, looking through your calendar, updating events, adding attachments, all those things you could do from an automation perspective. And then also the Exchange Admin, moving mailboxes, the what-if scenarios, and we'll get into some of that as well. We've got the new one for FTP. If you guys can believe it, you guys asked for it. This was the most highly requested integration pack that we've had going all the way back to the Opalis days. I know, Tony, it was, where's Gopher, right? So going back, so I'll show you the FTP IP as well, and you guys will see some of the stuff we can do. It's actually a really cool IP as far as like managing your files, your folders, your directory structures. Windows Azure. We'll look at the Windows Azure IP as well. It's brand new. I've got kind of a cool demo that I'll show you guys about using this IP to manage some of your PaaS instances. And then REST. This is kind of our get out of jail free card. If there's something that the Azure team develops later on The REST payload, you can pass it certificates, you can pass it configurations. You can do something against an Azure instance or an Azure resource that may not be native to the Azure IP. So again, that's kind of our get out of jail free card. And I'll show you an example of that using talking to a Netflix backend, right, to query for some data. Existing HPOM, SCOM, VMM, vSphere, DPM, Service Manager, blah, 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 blah. We've got a lot of IPs that are existing. We made a lot of updates to some of those IPs. I'll demo some of those as well, and you guys will see some of the new stuff that we have. And over on the right, you see foundational. And so these are the old things. These are like reaching into a SQL server, doing SNMP traps, right? Sending a platform event. And so this is the Xbox, right? This is core to Orchestrator. So there's a lot of things with scheduling, joining runbooks, functions, tying runbooks together, parents calling children, all those good things. Those are foundational. And so if I touched earlier on there was a Windows update that went out today for Orchestrator. We had a fix to both the SNMP service and we had a fix to the SQL Server ODBC foundation object as well. So if you're using any of those activities, note that you'll have a couple updates that will target the runbook server and also the runbook designer. But again, those are the foundational things. Those are foundational to the product. Those are there before you integrate with any other integration packs. So let's build some of our own. This is the cool part. How's that look, Walter? Good. So let me show you first what we're doing with the Virtual Machine Manager. So this is a workflow that I've built using some of the activities in VMM and some of the IP and some of the activities that are not native to the IP. So you can see the first 4 after initialized data that I have, I'm just calling a PowerShell script. And the scenario is I've got a new user that I need to add as a Fabric admin. I've got another user that I need to add as a self-service administrator. Right? If you look at the 4 different user roles that we have in Virtual Machine Manager, I want to add users to those roles and I want to give those users access to clouds, network, connections, resources, anything that you would do from a VMM admin perspective with regards to adding users and adding them consistently, predictably, on the fly. Maybe I call this from another service template. So that's what we'll do in the first 4 activities. Number 2 there, you see create service. That's creating a servicing window. And so if you know in VMM, how many VMM users in the audience? Good, so plenty of you kind of know where I'm going with this. We want to create a servicing window in VMM to say, hey, I can service my VMM servers at this time. Then, after I do those things, I want to make sure I take a database backup, right? Take a snapshot of the database, and in between, I'm using the get user roles to publish that data. So when I send out a mail or send out a notification, I can see, okay, I just added Ravi to the Fabric admins. I just added Eamon to the tenant administrators. I just added Justin to the self-service users, right? And I'll get a nice email. Remember we talked about the Exchange IP? I'm tagging that Exchange IP along the back end of that. And then lastly, I'm going to add a vSphere server to my Fabric, right? And so these are some of the things that I might do as a VMM administrator. Again, using some of the native activities that we have as part of the IP, and then using PowerShell. It's the beauty of VMM, right? You can run through anything in the UI and you get this nice PowerShell script at the end. So let me show you what I got here. So if we look at self-service users, one of the first things that I did was I just actually looked at the script inside of VMM. And let me show you what that looks like beforehand. So you can see I have no user roles. I have no servicing windows in my Fabric. I don't have a VMM server added to my library. So let's go back to settings, go back to my runbook, and you can see the script that I'm doing. And it's really just, hey, I need to attach to this VMM server, and I have the connection set up. Right, from tools, options, connect to VMM server, so I can pass it my VMM server name, pass it who I want to connect as. So any of these activities that get called in this workflow will connect as that user. So I've just got my script set up there. Then I'm going to go through and create my service window. And this is pretty straightforward stuff. Creating the service window there. Go through and getting my users, doing a quick backup, and adding my vSphere server. You see my backup directory is empty. I didn't have any user accounts. So let's fire off this runbook. So one of the things I want to see this go through successfully. And then what we'll do is we'll flip over to the VMM server and we'll look. We'll say, hey, did these user roles get created? Are they consistent? Do I have a servicing window created? Did the backup get created, right? Did I actually add that vSphere server to my environment? The cool thing about this, sometimes when these things fail, I could run this out of the runbook tester, which maybe I'll do for the VMM demo, and we can look at these activities as they fire and kind of look at the output of each activity as we go along. So let's check our log here and kind of look at where we're at. So you can see I'm kind of blowing through these different things, these different activities. And at the end of the demo, we'll look at my mailbox for my Hotmail account. We should see some emails coming in about things that got created. So if I flip over to my console, you can see I've got a nice servicing window created, right? Again, all automated, nice and neat. I should have some user roles created, right? And each of these user roles is going to have their own users created in them. I should have had a backup that got created. There it is. You guys can see the timestamp on it, so nothing up my sleeve here as far as what we're doing on the demos. And so that's the workflow. I look at the log history, and I can look to see through this and go, okay, out of this workflow, all these look good. Whew. Sometimes if they don't, you'll see either warnings, errors, and you can drill into those kind of real time and kind of see, hey, it was expecting this, but you passed it that. It was expecting A, but you passed it C. And you can kind of look at that. You can look at that in the runbook tester as well and kind of debug the output as you go. So that's kind of what we're looking at for VMM. The next demo, let's look at Azure. So the scenario for Azure, let me show you what the workflow looks like. And again, we had talked a little bit about, hey, where are these connections stored? If I go to here, right, I can tie into my Azure subscription, pass it my PFX file, give it the password, right, and give it the subscription ID. And these are the things that I need to provide as an Azure admin to be able to communicate. So I've got a machine certificate that I've exported out. I've put it on the runbook worker, so it's able to communicate with Azure, and it knows it has a trust with this machine, and you can look at that in kind of the certificate store. So this is what I have. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to list the Azure services. I'm going to send a platform event of what Azure services that I have available today. I'm going to use this IP to create the Azure service. And so the scenarios is I've got a developer in my organization, and she runs, and Timmy wants to write an MVC4 web service application. And when you do that, you can publish that into Azure, right? You can publish it from Visual Studio. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but you've got the package and the config files, right? So this workflow will actually look in a particular directory for those packages to exist, grab that, put it in a blob storage, create the MVC role, spin up the VMs, publish the application into the staging slot, give your developers time to say, hey, yeah, Pavel, last app you wrote was, let's have a look at this one. This one looks good, and then flip it over to the production slot, right? And so that's what we want to do here. And so you guys will see, like for service DNS prefix, I have random text, and I have label, I have event. Well, that allows me to use variables. And so as you can see over on the left-hand side of the far left of the screen, I've got variables that I can define. And what I've done here is I've just said like event equals whatever I happen to be presenting at. That way when I generate these workflows and I generate these websites or services or whatever else I'm looking at, I can pull these variables, and also I can look at the random data from generate text. That's a foundational object as well. But the cool thing about Orchestrator is this is published data, right? I can have a workflow composed of 10 different steps, and I can do things and get information about a back end or front end that I'm talking to, publish that data, and then use that data in subsequent activities. And so it's like, putting kids on the bus, and then you can use them later, and say, hey, okay, you kids, go to the pool, you other two, whatever. So it allows you to publish that data onto the data bus, and you can use it in subsequent activities. And so that's kind of what I'm doing with this. I pass it my affinity group, the values. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this PKG file, the CSPKG file, and I'm going to publish it to my blob storage in Azure. And that way, the next activity that I look at actually goes through, grabs those deployment packages, grabs the configuration as well, gives it a label, gives it the configuration package as well. I can pass it all these parameters. And the cool thing about this is as I'm doing this, as I'm connected, and I'll show you this with the vSphere example, for example, I can talk to the data store. right? And I can get a list at real time. So I have a nice object picker experience because I'm talking to that service, I'm querying that service, it's returning a list of things that I can pick from, so you're not just typing blind, right? You have a nice cascading dependency there. So that's what we'll do there. Then we're going to send a platform event, and then I'm going to swap the deployment. So let me show you the site beforehand. I talked about an email that we get, right? This was from that last one that we created. You get a nice email for VMM that says, hey, I just put Ravi in this group, just put Justin in this group, just put Eamon in this group. So there's an Exchange demo for you. So let's go back to the designer. Let me show you what we have as far as my hosted service today. You guys can see no tricks up my sleeve. I don't have any hosted services deployed. And in case some of you new folks to Azure running, this is the old portal. There's the new one that looks a lot cooler than this one. I just happen to have this one pulled up. So you guys can see I have no services deployed. So what I'm going to do, let's fire this off, and we can kind of look at what it's doing kind of as it's doing it. And so if I flip over to the portal, the next refresh is in 22 odd seconds or so. And so the first thing I expect to see is a container with a certificate that says, hey, I've got my hosted services that I want to create. The next thing we'll actually go to is spin up a VM, right, an MVC role for that web service, and it will publish that application to that web role. The next thing it'll do after that is it'll take it from the staging to the production slot, and then once I'm satisfied with bringing it from staging to production, I can actually start it up. So you can see I've got the MMS 2013 hosted services going up. You can see the deployment is actually starting. And at the end of the day, when this thing is finished, there's a little URL on the right. You can click on that thing, and it says, you know, it's the Hello World kind of sample MVC app that you get out of Visual Studio. So again, this scenario, hey, I've got my dev. I want to publish these things, but I want to have some kind of checkpointing in between to make sure, hey, before you swap this thing over to the production slot, let's have our devs take a look at it. And so you see we went from staging to production. Now I start this thing up, and it's ready to go. So maybe I have a host of developers that are writing to a particular directory. These workflows can come along, pick up these packages, publish them to staging, give you all an opportunity to review them, run another workflow behind it, and set them into production. So that's that was the Azure demo. So next, let's look at REST. So this REST activity, this one's kind of funny. The REST activity, again, being RESTful, it allows you to put like the whole payload. Everything that server needs to know about what you're asking for is put into the payload, right? So if you look at what I've done here, I've got a couple variables set up to invoke the REST service, and I'm simply making a call, an API call to the Netflix RESTful web service. And what I'm asking for is give me all of the titles that you have that have the word Terminator in them. Maybe that dates me a little bit, but that was the first thing I could think of. Maybe I should have used Star Wars. Well, Star Wars is probably even worse. So anyways, we'll look at Netflix and we'll look at Terminator to see kind of what we're looking at. And one of the things I want to do is, again, you're passing it the whole payload. I'm going to send a platform event. I'm going to send an email. And I'm also going to send a notification to my HPOM system. And so again, a lot of these activities that you have, you don't have to just compose a workflow with just VMM activities. You don't have to compose a workflow with just SCOM activities or vSphere. I can have a multitude of activities that kind of fit the requirement that I need. And that's the beauty of it, right? I have all these integration packs that do all these things that I can tie these workflows together and kind of use them independent or with each other. And in this case, I want to send this response to HPOM. And so how many HPOM users in the audience? Don't be shy. I know you're out there. You guys will see we send an acknowledged message, right? They do messages and kind of ticketing, kind of like SCOM does, but they just call them different things. But it's kind of the same at the end of the day. So we'll look at this web service and we'll actually run this one. And again, this one's kind of our get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to things like Azure, right? When the Azure team, because they are on a pretty heavy release cadence for all the cool new stuff that they're releasing, we can come along behind them and use this REST IP to do things that may not be native to the IP that we have for Azure today. So let's look at the platform event. And so again, we had talked a little bit earlier about some of the foundational objects. And these are things that I like to do. I like to write a platform event so I can see these things inside of Orchestrator, aside from I'm sending an email out, I'm notifying HP, and I'm doing all these other things that I want to do independent. So if I look at the response message, you can see I've done a request, and I'm getting things like Terminator, Rise of the Machines, Terminator Salvation. So I'm getting everything in my response query that I've identified. I said, hey, back-end RESTful web service, here's the entire payload of something that I need from you. Give it to me, and since it's RESTful, it's all contained in that payload. Right? I don't need to worry about stuff being cached on the server or stuff being cached on the client. Right? I can just make the request, it knows everything it needs to do, and it returns the results. So let's look at my email. And we'll start to see some of these pop into here as well. So let's see where that workflow's at. See it ran through, so we should get a message from HP as well. And I think if I look at acknowledged messages, did this one, where's this one? We'll see that one come in. And I'll get a list again of all the requests that have that particular ask in them, right? And I want to see Terminator popping up here. So that's what we have for REST. So let's go to HPOM. So again, it's a good segue into HPOM. And one of the things that I'll show you with HP is that we can talk to the HP system very similar to the way that we can talk to the SCOM system. And so what I'm going to do here, initialize the data, I'm going to create a message, I'm going to add an annotation to that message, I'm going to set the ticket to acknowledged, I'm going to set an owner for it, I'm going to send a platform event once I own it, send an email, and then I'm going to update the annotation as well. And so what this is really good for is some of the folks that I've seen, a lot of customers that I've talked to, they either use HPOM as the head of the system, where a lot of management products feed into it, or maybe HP feeds into SCOM, for example. And so what's nice about this is you can get a huge stream of alerts into your HP system, make modifications to those alerts and those tickets as you need to go to. If it has SQL in the context, make sure I assign it to the SQL team. If it has VMM in the context of the alert, make sure I assign it to the VMM team. If I need to acknowledge a message that the team is working on it, I have some flag that says, hey, this is being worked on by the Tier 2 escalation team. So if you look at it kind of a connector, right, we can pass tickets into or out of this system and massage them kind of as we need to do it, right? And so let's run this after I show you kind of what this create message looks like. Again, I'm passing variables for the event name. I'm passing start times. What's the application type? What's the object type? I can add an annotation, and I want to see System Center Orchestrator added to it. I want to set it to acknowledged, right, because it comes in not acknowledged. I want to send an owner, send a platform event, and then update it as well. So let's fire this off, and we'll kind of look at that as it comes in. You guys see this? Keep tabs on this while I flip back to it. Here's our Netflix payload, right? We had looked at kind of what that was looking at. And again, Exchange IP, right? I'm kind of using it as a tail end. You guys saw the alert come into HP, kind of little toast that popped up in the bottom corner. That was to say, hey, Justin, I've got an issue for you. The message was event with a timestamp of the activity. The annotation was done by me, and it was updated. And I've set it to acknowledged because the view I'm looking at is acknowledged messages. Right? So this alert kind of came in naked for all intents and purposes, and I've done quite a few things to it. I guess that was kind of a bad analogy. To get it to where I needed it to go. Right? And I've updated a lot of fields in this ticketing system. So maybe if it has the word assigned to Justin, maybe I assign it, and maybe I have another ticketing system that actually gives me the server name, properties, what I need to do. Maybe Walter's discovered some fix on this server before, and there's some tribal knowledge in there that I can reference, right? And go to the fix. So again, that's what we have. And so again, not just showing the automation points, right, but the integration points, right, with not just the Microsoft workloads, but the non-Microsoft workloads, you know, kind of that evolved data center. So that's where we're at with that one. I should have another email here so you guys can see Azure's coming in saying, hey, Justin, by the way, you've got a new affinity group, you've got a new application, your service is ready, here's what it is. And again, I'm just using published data. And so if I go back just real quick, and here's my HP one, right? So I've got a new owner, I've got it assigned, and that's the published data that I'm using. So for that one, for example, this email, hey, give me the email address, give me some other variable that's the service DNS prefix that I've assigned earlier, right? And so I'm using published data to relay my outbound email message, right? And it's as simple as doing a right-click, subscribe, publish data. I can pull all those properties because I've already interrogated the back end and figured out what I needed to figure out, and I'm using it for this demo. So that was the HP one. Next, let me show you all the FTP one. I think we're doing good on time too, so that's plenty of time to show you guys all this stuff. So the scenario here is, hey, I've got this directory, but I've got a boatload of drivers for my BIOS, I've got a boatload of drivers for my network cards, my video adapters. Some of them are ready for production, some of them are not ready for production. I need a way to kind of simplify this and point at this directory and grab all the sys files out of here, put them into this folder, create the folder. Maybe later on I need to rename 15 folders because you guys know FTP servers, a lot of heavy management, a lot of folder structures, a lot of directory traversing. This IP can hopefully help you with some of that automation and kind of manual work to let you go work on some other cool stuff. And so if I look at the workflow and kind of what I want to do here, I want to list the folders and just say, hey, what have you got on this FTP server right now? Just so I kind of know what I'm working with. And then I want you to create a folder called BIOS, right? Really simple, just give it the name. I want to create a folder called video. I want to create a folder called network. And then I want to rename this one from A to B, right? I want to rename it from this to that. Same thing here. Maybe this is my test slot for these particular drivers. And then I want to rename the one for the network as well. And then again, you guys are probably sick of seeing this create and send email, but it's kind of the crux of, hey, automation, right? If you're not using some other system to do your business logic, you've got a nice poor man's utility here to say, hey, I've just created some resources in this platform, tell me about them, right? And you don't need to do anything fancy, right? You just subscribe to the published data, right-click, subscribe, compose it, and you're done. So that's what we've got here. And I'm going to send an event log message as well. So let me pull up the event viewer because I always forget to do that. So I send a platform event, but I can also just write to the standard event log as well. And so this is great for things like SCOM that would come in and say, hey, when this alert or this thing goes into the app log, standard EBT out, or the system log, I can have some product come in there and pick these things up. So let's run this workflow. And we'll kind of look at what's happening as it's happening. So I'm going through, hey, create folders, rename files, put folders in these directories, all that good stuff. If I look back at my FTP directory, this is kind of what it was before. And now kind of here's what it looks like afterwards, right? I've got a release folder, probably not the sexiest demo you guys have ever seen in your life, right? We're talking about FTP here. But you guys can see just from an admin perspective, this could end up saving you a lot of time and a lot of pain with, managing folders and structures and all that stuff in FTP. So that's what we're looking at. And one of the things I did to make it even better, not really, you guys aren't interested in these particular workflows, but this is kind of my cleanup jobs. So as soon as I finish, come off the stage, I'll run these workflows and it goes through and kind of resets my stuff back to how it is. So I'll show you guys this one. I didn't call them anything formal or fancy, but it's actually going to go through and delete all those folders and all the files in those folders that I just created so I could run that parent one again, had rewound in time 2 minutes, right? So I'll go back here to this and make sure that this guy ran. Looks like it did. And I'm kind of back to square one. So you guys can undo some of these changes that you might accidentally do. Beauty of automation, right? You can automate away 1,000 things at once, but be careful, right, when you do it. Or you've just automated 1,000 errors. So watch yourself on that. So the next demo I'll show you all is Operations Manager. So I spent a good deal of time in my career with the operations manager team. I used to run the TAP and MVP programs, which I know a lot of you, that's where I see a lot of you guys that are familiar. So when I first joined the Orchestrator team, they said, hey, Justin, why don't you take over this IP for SCOM? I said, yeah, absolutely. I kind of get maintenance mode and recursive and why that's important and all those things. So when I looked at this particular IP, the one for RTM, there were a few issues with it. It was things like, hey, I didn't have the console installed, so I got an error that, with a red X that said OK, rather than, hey, knucklehead, go install the SCOM console. You need to have these two DLLs registered in the GAC. We didn't have things like recursive. And so if you guys remember, how many of you guys used MOM 2005? You guys remember we went to SCOM 2007? And how many SCCM folks in the audience? Hey, I'm deploying a package and I'm putting the server into maintenance mode. Tony, I think you burned me on that one a few times. How come I'm still getting alerts, right? And it was because we put the computer object into maintenance mode, but not the health service or the health service watcher. We're like, oh man. So now if we look at this particular IP, we put objects recursively. And so the scenario here is I've got a particular alert that's going to come in. I want to escalate it to tier 1. Well, tier 1's not good enough. I want to send it up to tier 2. Okay, tier 2's not good enough. Send it up to tier 3. Okay, man, something's really hit the fan here. Let's put this server to maintenance mode. Recursively put all the objects into maintenance mode. Update it, send the email, and send the platform event. So let me show you what the instance space for maintenance mode looks like beforehand. And if any of you, this is just a SCOM console, or the SCOM command line. So what I don't want to see here right now are any objects in maintenance mode. And so we may run the workflow and we'll look back at this. And then I want to show you kind of some of the alerts that we have as well. Just to show you that we're going to create these alerts, we're going to escalate these alerts, and we're going to assign them all the way up from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3. And if you look at the full-blown UI, you can actually see a lot of those alerts in the alert history tab to see they're updated by system, updated by system, updated by Orchestrator, updated by system. And you can kind of see those happening on the fly. So maintenance mode is taking its sweet time, so we'll come back to that. So let me run this, let me show you all what this looks like. Again, I'm using published data here to look at event description. That's just me being lazy, but it also shows that you can use variables. Maybe next week we're at Tech Ed, or next week we're in Berlin, or whatever's going on. You can swap those things out. Assign it to tier 1, then I want to assign it to tier 2. And the ticket ID, I'm going to populate some of that data. I'm going to set the resolution state to acknowledged, which I think is 255? 255? 254? Somewhere in there. You guys know what I'm talking about. Set it to acknowledged. And then I'm going to start maintenance mode. Again, this is kind of the same UI that you get in SCOM when you actually put an object into maintenance mode. Know that it's recursive, so it does it right. And when you lift something out of maintenance mode, it lifts those objects as well. And then it updates to alert to SQL Tier 3. This is when it actually goes to you, Timmy, being the third tier escalations. Again, I'm going to send mail and just send out the information about what just happened. I'm going to send a platform event too, and you can look at some of these platform events that I've published here. Right? I think I showed you guys the event viewer as well. We had something that we published a minute ago, Orchestrator Runbook, right, when we did the FTP thing. Right, that was the event coming in a little late. So that's what we have there. So let's see if the console has come back. Okay, good. Nothing is in maintenance mode right now. So let's run this workflow, and hopefully it won't take as long to put those objects into maintenance mode. But what I want to see is when I run the get maintenance mode again, I want to see the output just go, right? Because if we put the computer object into maintenance mode, we're putting all of the child objects into maintenance mode as well, so there should be quite a few rather than just one object, right? So let's look at this log and just kind of see where we're at. So it looks like we're starting maintenance mode, we're sending some mails around, we're sending the platform events. So let's look at the platform event while we're waiting, and we'll see that I've taken this particular alert, right, and I've set it to tier 1. It's been escalated to tier 2, and it's been escalated to tier 3. This is data that I got from the published off the data bus, right? This isn't data that was just written to here, right? This is data that was written from the bus. So now, let's look at the log history. Looks like everything's pretty good. So let's have a look at this, right, we'll see lots of objects in maintenance mode, right? This was, again, just to show you that the IP's been updated a bit. It does recursive mode, which is invaluable to any SCOM administrator. And then let me show you the alert that we created. I think it should be somewhere around here. Oh, we didn't create the alert, yeah. So that one is here. So we've got these alerts that we're creating as well, right? And again, you guys just see that I substituted the word event, and I had that as a variable, and the event variable was Microsoft Management Summit 2013, and it writes out the alert. So that's where we're at there. So you folks that use SCOM in your heads, I know you're going, finally, we're looking for credit, but that was actually a bug on our end, so apologize in advance, but it's fixed now. So that's where we're at on that. So that was the SCOM. Next one I'll show you all is vSphere. So the scenario here is I have a vSphere server that I'm managing. I've got a list of resources. How many of you using VMware? More than using the OIT, right? What's that? The other guys, yes. Thanks, Marnix. I'm using the other guys. So this is kind of cool in that I've got my data centers defined. I'm managing an ESX box. This is just a standard vSphere server 5.0. What I want to do here is I want to create a new VM. I want to clone that VM. I want to take a snapshot of that VM. I want to reconfigure that VM. I want to add a disk, right? I want to add a new network interface. I want to take a snapshot of it. Then I want to power it up. And then I want to tell the world, hey, HP, I've got a new one for you. Hey, SCOM, I've got a new resource for you. And so that's what we're going to do with this IP. And all of this is available to you in the integration pack itself. And so I'm going to create the VM. And what's cool about this is when it actually reaches into the VM server, I can actually say, hey, what data stores do you have available for placement? What network interfaces do you have for me to choose from? What VHDs or ISOs do you have available for you to mount in some CD drive? Right? Again, it takes away a lot of the guesswork that you would need to know, hey, I need to know all the intrinsics and all the specifics about this vSphere server. Well, you don't, because I can just go through here for host system path, and it gives me a nice list of any host system paths that I might have on that vSphere server. I pick the one that's interesting to me and go about my workflow. So let's look. So that's what I've done here. I'm going to create it. I'm going to use data store 1. I'm going to substitute event for the machine name, and so that should be the machine name that comes up. And then I'm going to clone it. Right? I'm just going to say, hey, give me that machine that I just created and add like an underscore clone to the end of it. Right? And then from there, go through and reconfigure the network interface. Add a network card. Add a new disk, start up the VM, take a snapshot, get the host properties before, get the list before, get after. So this allows me to say, hey, I've got this vSphere instance, I've got this ESX box that I'm managing. When you send that email about all the stuff that I've created for this, tell me what I had on there before, tell me what's on there now, right? Tell me about snapshots that I might have created, right? Send the email to me, maybe notify HP, maybe notify SCOM. Again, a lot of different integration points that you guys can use to configure these workflows. So let me fire this guy off. Let's look to see if we have any other mails. So we got our FTP. Hey, by the way, I did the FTP rename, and here's our SCOM, right? We got a lot of, hey, here's what we did from this guy. We escalated it. So let's fire off this particular workflow. And I will look back at my VMM server. Give me a chance to take a drink. So what I want to see here is you guys will see the actual jobs that are running. In the bottom left-hand corner, in about 10 seconds or so, if this thing works like it's supposed to, you'll actually see a new VM. So it's going to create virtual machine. So you'll see I have a new machine called MMS 2013. It then says, hey, after you create this machine, I want you to take a clone of that virtual machine. After you clone it, I want you to reach in and reconfigure that VM, right, and add a new network interface. Then I want you to reconfigure it again and add a new disk. Then I want to take a snapshot of it, so it's on reconfigure, so it's adding the disk. Reconfigure, it's going to add another network interface. Then it's going to take a snapshot then it's going to power it on. And so just about everything that you can do from the UI inside of the vSphere console, you can automate away. So, hey, I need 5 VMs, right? Just write it and automate it. Click on a button, invoke the runbook. So you've got these nice and set up. So I've got a virtual machine snapshot that just got created. It's going to power up the machine. So let's kind of look at the before and after. If I look at the parent, you can see I just have one hard disk and one VM network, right? If I look at the clone, right, no smoke and mirrors. We've added another network adapter, right? We've added another disk. And I said something about a snapshot in there as well. Right? Oh, that's the wrong machine. So if we look at the snapshot manager for that machine, right? I've got a nice snapshot of that machine. So now I can hand this machine out. I've got a nice snapshot of it. Maybe, Pavel, you need to use it for something. You can mess around with it, install your applications, do whatever you need to do. I've got a nice snapshot of it. Right? I've given a network interface with maybe your VLAN, so you can connect to it and do what you need to do. I've added another disk, so you can put all your content on there. And I've got a nice snapshot of it as well, in case I need to roll you back. Right? And so that's just, kind of VMware Management 101. So that's what we have for vSphere. So let me show you this runbook one more time. So again, here's our friend, right? The nice email notifications. Parent VM name, VM clone name, added the new adapter, added the new disk, and it tells me kind of what the snapshot's name is. So if I go back through here, I've got another cheat workflow that will actually go through and delete these VMs. And so if we look at kind of what we're doing, it'll go through and kind of force these things off and delete them from disk. Because what I want to show you, I want to run this workflow out of the tester as well, for you folks that may not have seen Orchestrator or used it that much, just so you can see kind of what that tester experience looks like. Right? I can say just run one activity. Okay, run the next activity. Set a breakpoint. Right? When you get to here, stop. Right? And so that's the nice thing about the runbook tester as well. So as soon as this guy finishes deleting, which it is, let me show you kind of what that looks like in the tester. So I'm at the console, right? And you can see here I've got a runbook tester, and it's going to ask me, hey, do you want to check this runbook out? Because in order to test it, it needs to check it out. I'm going to say yes. And it opens up this, probably not the prettiest UI you've ever seen in your lives as far as a tester goes, but it is functional. And so you can see here, I can look at the kind of composition of what I've done, and I can say step through, right, or just run through. And so if I execute this, at the bottom, you'll actually see these details lighting up. Here's what we're doing, here's the next step, here's what we've completed. If something fails, you can actually see the nice output stream that's, hey, this VM's already created, hey, this disk is unavailable, hey, an ISO that you specified in some path, someone went along and deleted the ISO accidentally. So this is where you can do some of your runbook validation to make sure that your runbooks are working as expected. So once it gets past the get host properties, which usually takes about 20 seconds or so, it'll run through the next series of activities, and it will do the same thing that we did when we ran it through the designer, right? It'll go through and create these VMs. It'll create the snapshots. It'll add the disks. It'll add the network interfaces. So again, we've got a nice designer tester interface that we can look at to see, hey, show me the details. You asked for get host properties before, right? When did these activities start? What properties did you get from it? What are the builds? What are the machine names? What's the name of the clone that you created? What's the name of the parent that you created, right? And so you can do a lot from the tester. So if we look back at the console, you can see it's doing the same thing that we did in that activity just a few minutes ago. So we've got that designer. We've also got, I talked a little bit about the web client. And so this is Silverlight based. This gives me a nice inventory of all my runbooks. This allows me to start jobs, stop jobs, pause jobs, look at the composition of my workflows in a nice visual experience. right? I can look at my input, output, and I get a lot of my job statistics as well, right? You could have multiple jobs running off of the same run book, right? And you can see kind of when those jobs finished, when they completed, how many successfully completed in the last 7 days, how many successfully completed in the last 24 hours, and you can see your nice run books here. So that's what we've got with regards to, here's my deleted VMs, right? I get a note that says, hey, you deleted your VMs. So that's what we have for the vSphere demo. Again, it's nice and simple to browse into those things. So Exchange user, I think I've demoed the Exchange user one pretty well, but let me show you just how we set up the connection points. As far as options, we go to Exchange user, I go to Exchange web services, right, and I just pass it the ASMX web service URL for EWS. Auto-discover is turned on for our Exchange infrastructure. I pass it my username and password and give it a timeout. So everything that I do now for that Exchange IP, it reaches into my Office 365 cloud-based mailbox, right? It can be an on-prem mailbox or it can be a cloud-based mailbox. It's agnostic on how you connect to it because we're using and we're redistributing the Exchange SDK. So it's an older Exchange SDK. It's the old 1.2. It's about 6 years old, but the next iteration of the IP, we're going to use the 2.0. They haven't I talked to the PM who owns it. They haven't deprecated any classes, so if you're using it today, know that once we have an IP refresh and we use 2.0, the old stuff that you have in the old workflows shouldn't break any. So just know that. So what I'm doing in this particular workflow, I'm just simply creating an item. Again, cheating with event description. I'm going to give it the orchestrator. I'm going to update the appointment and attach an image. I'm going to send it to my Hotmail address. You guys see I'm a college football fan. Grew up in Oklahoma, so I had no choice but to like the Sooners. Hopefully there's no Texas fans in the audience. Update appointment, and then I'm going to auto forward this alert. So let me just run this up. And we can kind of look how this workflow goes. And at the end of the day, I want to get an appointment in my calendar on my Hotmail account that's been updated, that has an attachment, and it talks about MMS. And I set the time start date. I always use activity start time, so it publishes it kind of real time, so I don't make a mistake in like publishing it on July 4th or whatever, so you guys wouldn't be able to see it. So I want to see this. So here's our VMM management. So we went in and did all the clones. And so in just a few minutes, we'll see something come in for Exchange as well. And it should have that attachment because that's what I did on the update. The next one, Amazon. How many of you folks are running any EC2, S3, RDS, anything in Amazon? Here's what I like. Their module that they ship for AWS has about 715 commandlets. And I was talking to a customer and they said, hey, Justin, man, I need a workflow to do Azure management. So the scenario that I built for these guys just kind of says, hey, I've got a new user in my organization. I'm going to create that new user using their IAM, Identity and Access Management, I think is what it stands for. I want to create a new group. I want to add that user to a group. When that happens, I actually publish an event into SCOM. And SCOM says, hey, I know what to do with that. And it fires off these other child run books that come along behind it and say, okay, I just created that new user. I need to give that new user an RDS SQL instance. I need to give that new user an S3 bucket. And I need to give that new user an EC2 instance. Right? So, hey, I'm a new user, new to the group. Showing some SCOM integration, we're showing some HP integration, so I'll show you kind of what I did. So I've got this trigger, and this trigger is looking in SCOM saying, hey, anytime you create a new user and it has like IAM and AWS and a couple other verbs that I have for, or nouns that I have in the alert context, let me know about it. So that's what we'll do. So this runbook is running, so the one thing I need to do, I'm going to be using Chrome just to show you guys. Platform agnostic, even though I'm definitely pro Microsoft. So we have no users and we have no roles. I have no buckets created. I have no EC2 instances created. And I have no RDS databases created. So I've got my users and my roles, my groups. I'm not doing anything with roles, just users and groups. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to kick off this runbook. And you can see what I'm doing here, creating a user group. And what I've done was I've just passed it an access key and my secret key as variables, right? And I can define those and call them in my workflow later. So I'm literally importing their, I've installed their module. I'm importing their module, so I have all the commandlet reference. I'm passing it the default connection string, if you will. I'm giving it a username and group name just from generate random text because I don't care what it's called. And then I'm just passing it new user, username, variable, new IAM group, variable, add user to group. And so I'm just passing it these command line references. And I built a lot of these just using the, Azure, the ISC, right? Just the PowerShell commandlets, load the module, call the ISC, run the workflows, and paste them into here. And so I've literally just called the type PowerShell, creating the user groups. And then when we talk about RDS, creating the relational database, I'm doing the same thing, right? I'm passing it my RDS password, SQL Server, as far as the engine, the type. Do I want a micro instance? Do I want a small instance? Do I want a medium instance, extra large, all the different types that they have, allocated storage, and then I'm literally just passing it the commandlet. So if I do this, you guys can kind of see a better picture of the whole workflow for that particular piece of it, right? So that's what we have for RDS. And then S3, again, doing a lot of the same thing and just passing it the buckets and the bucket names. And then for EC2, what type of machine do I want? What's the AMI? I think it stands for Amazon Machine Instance, right? It just ID, right? It says, hey, I want a Windows server with SQL Server, whatever. I want an Ubuntu server, I want a Red Hat server, I want a Linux box, whatever the case is. You pass it the AMI after you load the modules. So I've got this trigger, so let me run this IAM. So I'm going to run this workflow, and we'll kind of look at what it's doing, kind of how it's doing it. And at the end of the day, I want to see an HP pop up that says, hey, new user created, just again to show you integration points with our stuff, their stuff, his stuff, her stuff. I want to send a platform event that says, hey, I just created this new user. So there's my HP, right? I get an alert, hey, by the way, this is created. I'm also sending this into SCOM, and SCOM has a trigger that says, hey, when you see this thing, kick off these other child runbooks, and these child runbooks will create these other instances. So if I flip over to users and groups, I've got a new user, or a new group that was just created, right? And if I look, the user that I've got in there is this guy, right, for my generated data. So I can see my user that I just created. So those are my IAM. That's kind of where I'm starting with. I've got a new user, put a new user into that group. This could be Walter, and I put Walter into the this guy's awesome group, right? Then if I go to S3, let's refresh this, and I should see a new bucket get created, right? Again, random generated text, and this is just kind of for my storage stuff, right? EC2, I should see a new instance getting spun up, right? Per the guidelines that I've given it, per the parameters that I've passed in the workflow. Right? Initializing, starting it up, right? Getting it ready for me. And then lastly, I should have a big 20 gig database that's getting spun up, right? And this thing takes a little bit longer because it actually provisions the space. But you'll actually see this thing getting created. Right? So then there I've got a new user, need to add the user to some resources. I've got some integration points with HP, I've got some integration points with SCOM, using all PowerShell, right? There's no IP for this. But the beauty of it is if they have modules and they support PowerShell, we can run a lot of these workflows and kind of build our own on the fly. So that's what we have for AWS. I think we've got about 5 minutes or so left, so let me show you the last demo I wanted to show you guys, which was Twitter. And this was just kind of a fun one. I got it off of Codeplex. And if you look at what we're doing here, I'm literally just saying get tweets with the hashtag MMS 2013. And so what I can do is I'll run this workflow. And let's look at my mailbox as well while that's running. So here's that event we were talking about with the Exchange user. Remember I said I wanted to have an attachment, send it out to my Hotmail address. So that was the Exchange user demo that I talked to you guys about. This one is running. and I flattened it so it just sends one email to me. But I can also look at the platform event. And if you guys look here, some of your names are probably in here. Kevin Green, MS Cloud, Matthew Long, Cameron Fuller, Ronnie, Catapult System, Kevin Green again, Cameron again, Ronnie again. And you can see that when they publish them, what they're writing, what's new. Oh yeah, here we go. Watching Justin showing off. Who did that? Anybody? Don't be shy. Come on, I asked you guys to do that. So thank you for whoever did that, because that was one of the things I wanted to demo, right? There was hashtag MMS 2013. So I've gone through and got a whole poll of what has been tweeted about, or twittered about, or whatever you guys are calling it. So if I look back at the email, I'll get an email as well that gives me that nice flattened list. But I showed you guys what the platform event looks like, and we get that same data. So that's kind of what we're looking at for that last demo. So you guys have seen. Let me make sure we've covered everything. Yeah, I think we're pretty good on time. PowerShell. In case we lost connectivity, I would have had to have resorted to showing you screenshots. So again, with VMM, kind of what we learned today, quick summary. We learned that we can use some of the built-in activities, or we can use PowerShell for managing VMM. Remember, we created the schedule, we created the servicing window, we created the backup, created all the users. For Azure, we have an application that we publish. We want to pick up those published files, put them into Azure, set them to the default staging, right? Let our devs look at them, let QA sign off of them, then set them over to production. For REST, kind of our get out of jail free, I can pass it the entire payload. I don't need to worry about server client caching. HPOM, again, I can talk to these third-party systems. For FTP, created those the folder structure, the directory structures. SCOM, we escalated those alerts, right? We saw the things enter maintenance mode, all the recursive objects entering maintenance mode. vSphere, we did some cool stuff with the runbook tester. Let's create some VMs, let's clone them, let's reconfigure them. Exchange, you guys saw that one 10 times probably. AWS, right, and Amazon, we created all the new resources that we needed to create for a new user that happened to be part of the system. And then we just did the last Twitter one. Do that, do this, and thanks for your time, folks. Yeah, thank you. And I just got the SCO Twitter feed mail, so you guys can see that as well. So I'm going to go to the booth at 2:30. So if you guys want to come by and chat, doesn't have to be about Orchestrator, come by at 2:30 and I'll be there.